The lawyer walked into my auto shop at exactly 3:15 on my 45th birthday, carrying a manila envelope like it was a prize. His name was Peterson, and he wore a smile that could have sold ice to penguins. "Nick Thompson?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "That's me." I wiped my hands on a shop rag, leaving streaks of motor oil that would never completely wash out. 20 years of working on engines had permanently stained my fingerprints black. "Happy birthday," Peterson said, extending the envelope. "From your wife." I should have known right then. Danielle hadn't wished me happy birthday that morning, hadn't even looked at me during our silent coffee routine. Just sat there scrolling through her phone, probably texting her business partner Troy about their next meeting. The divorce papers were crisp and official. Full custody to Danielle, the house, the savings account, even my custom tool collection that I'd built over 2 decades. Everything except the shop, and only because it was technically worthless on paper. "She gets everything," Peterson explained with practiced sympathy. "Your children requested to change their last names. They don't want any association with you moving forward." That hit harder than expected. Emma was 16 and angry about everything lately, but Max was only 12. The idea of him wanting to erase me from his life felt like swallowing broken glass. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, ever since I found that burner phone in Danielle's car. "Give this to my wife," I said, handing it to Peterson. "Tell her it's my birthday gift to her." Peterson tucked it into his briefcase without looking. "Mr. Thompson, I know this is difficult, but cooperation will make the process smoother for everyone involved." After he left, I stood in my empty shop, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and metal shavings. The radio was playing some classic rock song about better days, but I switched it off. The silence felt more honest. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. "Saw a fancy lawyer at your place. Everything okay?" Small towns are like living inside a fishbowl. Everyone watches, everyone talks, everyone has an opinion about your business. By tomorrow, half the neighborhood would know about the divorce papers. By next week, they'd all have theories about whose fault it was. I locked up the shop early and drove home through streets I'd traveled for 15 years. The house looked the same from outside. White colonial with black shutters, manicured lawn, 2-car garage. But inside, it felt like a museum of a life that used to exist. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Danielle was in the kitchen, still wearing her power suit from the law firm. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, I saw something that might have been guilt flash across her face. "You got my message," she said. "Loud and clear?" I set my keys on the counter. "Where are the kids?" "Emma's at soccer practice. Max is at his friend's house." She turned back to her laptop. "We need to discuss logistics." "Logistics." I repeated the word like it tasted bad. "Is that what we're calling it?" "Nick, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder for who? You? Troy?" Her fingers stopped moving on the keyboard. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." I opened the refrigerator and grabbed a beer. "How long has it been going on?" "Nothing is going on." "The burner phone says otherwise." Now she turned around completely. Her face had gone pale except for 2 red spots on her cheeks. "You went through my things?" "I found it in your car when I was looking for jumper cables. Funny thing about burner phones, they're usually pretty obvious about their purpose." Danielle closed her laptop and stood up. Even in heels, she was shorter than me, but she carried herself like she owned every room she entered. 20 years of marriage, and I still wasn't sure if that confidence was attractive or infuriating. "We can do this the easy way or the hard way," she said. "But either way, it's happening." The easy way would have been a conversation, maybe some counseling. The hard way is serving me papers on my birthday while you're planning your new life with your business partner. Troy has nothing to do with this. Really? Because those text messages suggested otherwise. She picked up her laptop and headed for the stairs. "I'm staying at my mother's tonight. We'll figure out a schedule for you to see the kids. If they want to see me. According to your lawyer, they're pretty eager to pretend I don't exist." Danielle paused at the bottom of the stairs. "You did this to yourself, Nick. You checked out of this family years ago." After she left, I sat in my kitchen drinking beer and staring at the refrigerator covered with school photos, soccer schedules, and grocery lists written in Danielle's precise handwriting. Everything looked normal, but normal was apparently an illusion I'd been living in for months. My phone rang. Big Ray from the boxing gym. "Thompson, you coming in tonight? Got a new heavy bag that needs breaking in." "Yeah," I said. "I'll be there." "Good. You sound like you need to hit something. Big Ray was right. I did need to hit something, but first, I needed to figure out exactly what I was fighting. The next morning, I drove past Troy's real estate office 3 times before parking across the street. His BMW was in the reserved spot with the personalized license plate. Sold for you. Even his car was a walking advertisement. Troy Brennan had joined Danielle's law firm 2 years ago as a business development consultant. Tall, gym fit, with the kind of smile that probably worked great on clients and apparently worked even better on my wife. I'd met him at a few company parties where he'd made a point of talking about his marathon times and his weekend trips to wine country. I watched him through the office window, gesturing dramatically while talking to a young couple who looked like first-time homebuyers. Everything about Troy was performance. The expensive suit, the perfect hair, the way he touched people's arms when he talked to emphasize his sincerity. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Mom says you're being difficult about the divorce. Just sign the papers so we can move on. 16 years old, and she already sounded like a lawyer. I wondered if that was Danielle's influence, or if Emma had always been that calculating. It was hard to tell anymore. The sweet little girl who used to help me work on cars had been replaced by someone who treated me like an inconvenience. I texted back, "Good morning to you too." She didn't respond. Around noon, Troy left the office and drove to a coffee shop downtown. I followed at a distance, feeling ridiculous but unable to stop myself. He ordered something complicated with extra foam and sat at a corner table, checking his phone constantly. At 12:30, Danielle walked in. She'd changed out of her usual business attire into jeans and a sweater that I'd bought her for Christmas 2 years ago. They hugged like old friends, but the way Troy's hand lingered on her back suggested they were much more than that. I sat in my truck across the street, watching them through the coffee shop window like some kind of stalker. They talked for over an hour, and I could see Danielle laughing at whatever Troy was saying. She looked relaxed and happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. When they left together, I followed them to a luxury apartment complex on the north side of town. Troy's BMW disappeared into the underground garage, and I parked on the street, staring up at the building's glass facade. My phone rang. It was Max. "Dad? Mom says I can't come to the shop after school anymore." "Why not?" "She says it's not appropriate during the divorce proceedings." Max pronounced the words carefully, like he'd been coached. "What are divorce proceedings?" "It means your mom and I are getting unmarried." "Because you don't love each other anymore?" The question hit me sideways. "It's complicated, buddy." "Emma says you're a loser, and that's why Mom doesn't want to be married to you." "Emma says a lot of things." "Are you a loser, Dad?" I looked up at the apartment building where my wife was probably making plans for her new life. "I don't know, Max. Maybe I am." "I don't think you're a loser." "Thanks, buddy. That means a lot. Can I still come to the shop sometimes? I like helping you fix cars." "We'll figure something out." After I hung up, I sat in my truck for another 2 hours, waiting for them to come out. When they finally did, Troy was wearing different clothes, a casual shirt and khakis instead of his business suit. They walked to his car, holding hands. That night, I went to Murphy's Bar, a dive on the wrong side of downtown where the beer was cheap and nobody asked questions. I'd been going there since I was 25, back when Danielle and I were newlyweds, and she thought my blue-collar friends were charming. "You look like someone ran over your dog," said Murphy, the owner and bartender. He was 70 years old and had been listening to sob stories for 40 years. "Worse, someone ran over my marriage." "Ah." Murphy poured me a whiskey without being asked. "The wife?" "The wife and her business partner." "That's rough. You want to talk about it?" "Not really." Murphy nodded and moved down the bar to serve other customers. That was one of the things I liked about Murphy's. Nobody pushed you to share your feelings. I was on my 3rd whiskey when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Stop following us, or there will be consequences." I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decide if I was angry or embarrassed. Probably both. Getting caught stalking your wife and her lover wasn't exactly a high point in anyone's life story. I texted back, "Or what?" The response came immediately. "Or everyone will know what kind of man you really are." I laughed out loud, which made the guy next to me look over with concern. What kind of man was I, really? A guy who worked with his hands, who'd served his country, who'd spent 20 years trying to build a life with someone who was apparently planning her escape the whole time? "Another?" Murphy asked. "Yeah," I said. "And keep them coming." By the time I left Murphy's, I'd made a decision. If they wanted to know what kind of man I really was, I'd be happy to show them. I started small. Petty, really, but sometimes petty is all you have left. Troy's BMW was parked in the same underground garage the next afternoon. I'd spent the morning at the hardware store, picking up supplies. Sugar for the gas tank was a myth, but water in the oil reservoir would cause some expensive problems. A few strategic scratches along the paint job wouldn't hurt either. The security in the garage was minimal, just a camera at the entrance that didn't cover the parking spaces. I worked quickly, professionally, like I was performing routine maintenance instead of committing minor vandalism. Before leaving, I tucked a note under his windshield wiper. "You'll wish you'd stayed away from my family." That evening, Emma called while I was eating dinner alone in my kitchen. "Dad, you need to stop whatever you're doing." "Hello to you too, sweetheart." "I'm fine. Thanks for asking." "I'm serious. Mom says you're harassing them." "Harassing who?" "You know who." I set down my fork and looked at the family photos still hanging on the kitchen wall. Emma at 8 years old, missing her front teeth. Max at 5, covered in chocolate cake at his birthday party. Danielle and me at our wedding, both of us looking impossibly young and optimistic. "Emma, do you remember when you were little and wanted to learn how to change a tire?" "What does that have to do with anything?" "You were maybe 10 years old, and you said you wanted to be independent. So I taught you how to change a tire, check the oil, jump-start a battery. You said you never wanted to depend on anyone else to take care of you." "Dad, I was proud of you for that. Still am. This isn't about me." "Isn't it? You're 16 years old, Emma, old enough to think for yourself instead of just repeating what your mother tells you." The line went quiet for a moment. Then, "Mom says you're having some kind of breakdown." "Maybe I am, or maybe I'm finally paying attention." "To what?" "To the fact that my family has been planning to erase me for months, and I've been too stupid or too trusting to see it coming." "Nobody's trying to erase you." "Really? Then why are you and Max changing your last names?" Another pause. "Because Mom says it would be easier." "Easier for who?" "For everyone. Not for me. Dad, just sign the papers, please. Everyone will be happier." After she hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at those family photos until they started to look like evidence from someone else's life. Happy moments that belonged to a different version of myself, a version who trusted that the people he loved wouldn't systematically plan his destruction. The next morning, Troy's car troubles made the local news. Not the lead story, obviously, but a brief mention about vandalism in the upscale Riverside Apartments complex. The reporter interviewed a few residents about security concerns, and Troy appeared on camera looking appropriately outraged. "This is exactly the kind of random crime that makes people feel unsafe in their own neighborhoods," he said, standing next to his damaged BMW. "The police need to take this more seriously." I watched the news segment from my shop, drinking coffee and feeling satisfied in a way that probably wasn't healthy. It was a small victory, but after weeks of feeling powerless, small victories were all I had. My satisfaction lasted until noon when Peterson the lawyer called. "Mr. Thompson, we need to discuss your recent behavior." "What behavior?" "The harassment, the stalking, the property damage." "I don't know what you're talking about." "Security cameras disagree." That stopped me cold. I'd been careful about the garage camera, but I hadn't thought about street cameras or traffic lights or any of the dozen other ways modern life tracks your movements. "Mr. Thompson, are you there?" "I'm here." "My client is prepared to file a restraining order unless this behavior stops immediately." "Your client can file whatever he wants? Not just Mr. Brennan. Your wife as well. She's concerned about her safety and the safety of your children." "Danielle thinks I'm dangerous?" "She thinks you're unpredictable. Given recent events, that concern seems justified." After Peterson hung up, I walked outside and stood in the parking lot behind my shop. The autumn air was crisp and clean, and I could hear traffic from the highway a few blocks away. Normal sounds of a normal day in a normal town where normal people went about their normal business without plotting revenge against their cheating wives and their smug boyfriends. But I wasn't normal people anymore. I was the guy whose wife had been planning his destruction for months while he fixed cars and coached Little League and pretended everything was fine. I was the guy whose own children wanted to change their names to avoid association with him. If that's what they thought of me, maybe it was time to give them something real to worry about. The restraining order arrived on a Thursday. I was under the hood of a 2018 Honda when Peterson walked into my shop for the second time in 2 weeks. "Mr. Thompson, you're legally required to stay at least 500 feet away from your wife, Mr. Brennan, and their respective residences and workplaces." I wiped my hands and took the papers. The language was formal and intimidating, full of legal threats about contempt of court and potential jail time. But what struck me most was seeing my name listed as the respondent in a harassment case. 20 years of marriage, and now I was officially classified as a threat to my wife's safety. There's also this, Peterson said, handing me another envelope. Custody modification. Your visitation rights have been suspended pending a psychological evaluation. A psychological evaluation? Standard procedure in cases involving harassment and potential domestic violence. I never touched her. Property damage and stalking behavior suggest escalating patterns of aggression. After Peterson left, I called the number on the custody papers and made an appointment with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a family therapist who specialized in divorce-related evaluations. Her office was in a medical complex downtown, with motivational posters and tissue boxes strategically placed throughout the waiting room. Dr. Mitchell was younger than I'd expected, probably early 40s, with the kind of calm, measured voice that suggested years of dealing with angry, broken people. "Tell me about your marriage," she said, settling into her chair with a legal pad. "Which part? The 20 good years, or the part where my wife planned my destruction while I was fixing cars and coaching Little League? You feel betrayed. I feel like an idiot. Why? Because I trusted someone who was systematically planning to erase me from my children's lives." Dr. Mitchell made notes while I talked. I told her about the burner phone, the secret meetings, the way Emma and Max had been coached to distance themselves from me. I told her about Troy's smug smile and Danielle's cold efficiency in dividing up our life like it was a business transaction. "How did you respond to discovering the affair?" "I followed them a few times." And I may have damaged Troy's car." "May have? I damaged Troy's car? What else?" I thought about the note I'd left, the late-night drives past their apartment building, the angry text messages I'd sent and deleted. I made some poor choices. Such as acting like a jealous husband instead of a rational adult. "Do you regret those choices?" "I regret getting caught." Dr. Mitchell looked up from her notes. "That's an interesting answer. It's an honest answer. Are you concerned about your behavior escalating further?" "Are you asking if I'm dangerous?" "I'm asking if you're in control." I thought about that question for a long time. Was I in control? Or was I just reacting to circumstances beyond my influence, like a pinball bouncing between bumpers until I finally fell through the bottom of the machine? "I don't know," I said finally. "I used to think I was in control. I had a business, a family, a life that made sense. Now I'm sitting in a therapist's office explaining why I'm not a threat to my own children. What would control look like now? I have no idea." That night, I sat in Murphy's bar drinking whiskey and thinking about Dr. Mitchell's question. What would control look like? For weeks, I'd been reacting to Danielle's moves like we were playing chess, and she was always 3 steps ahead. But maybe it was time to stop playing her game and start playing my own. My phone buzzed with a text from Max. "Dad, can you come to my soccer game Saturday? Mom says you're not allowed, but I want you there." I stared at the message for a long time. The restraining order specifically prohibited me from attending school events where Danielle might be present. But it was Max's game, not hers, and he wanted me there. I texted back, "I'll be there, buddy." "Promise?" "Promise." Murphy appeared with another whiskey. "You look like you're making plans." "Maybe I am." "Good plans or bad plans?" "Probably bad plans." "Those are usually the most interesting." I raised my glass. "Here's to bad plans." "And to not getting caught," Murphy added. But getting caught wasn't the problem anymore. The problem was that I'd been playing by rules that nobody else was following. Danielle had broken our marriage vows, turned my children against me, and painted me as a dangerous stalker, all while maintaining her reputation as the responsible, professional one. If she wanted to play hardball, I was ready to show her what that really looked like. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold, with the kind of October wind that cuts through your jacket and reminds you winter is coming. Max's soccer game was at the middle school field, and I parked 3 blocks away to avoid violating the restraining order's distance requirements. I could see Danielle in the bleachers, wearing her expensive coat and talking on her phone. Troy sat beside her, playing the role of supportive stepfather-to-be. They looked like the perfect couple, successful, attractive, completely absorbed in their new life together. Max played midfielder, and he was good. Fast, smart, with the kind of field awareness that coaches love. Every time he touched the ball, I wanted to cheer, but I stayed quiet in my spot behind the chain-link fence, far enough away to avoid arrest, but close enough to watch my son play. At halftime, Max jogged over to the sideline for water and spotted me through the fence. His face lit up, and he waved enthusiastically. Several parents turned to see who he was waving at, including Danielle. She stood up immediately, scanning the area until she found me. Even from 50 yards away, I could see the anger on her face. She said something to Troy, who also turned to look in my direction. Troy started walking toward me with the confident stride of a man who'd never been in a real fight. He was bigger than me, younger, with the kind of gym muscles that look impressive but don't necessarily translate to actual strength. "You're not supposed to be here," he said when he reached the fence. "It's a public park. There's a restraining order. I'm more than 500 feet from your girlfriend." "She's not my girlfriend." I laughed. "Right. You're just business partners who happen to live together." Troy stepped closer to the fence. "You need to leave." "Or what? Or I'll call the police." "Go ahead." He pulled out his phone, but before he could dial, Max appeared beside him. "Dad, you came." Troy looked uncomfortable. "Max, your father isn't supposed to be here." "Why not?" "Because there are rules about these things." Max looked confused. "What rules?" I spoke through the fence. "How'd you play, buddy? That goal in the first quarter was beautiful." "Thanks. Did you see the assist too?" "I saw everything." Danielle appeared beside Troy, her face tight with controlled anger. "Nick, you need to leave." "I'm watching my son play soccer." "You're violating a court order." "I'm standing in a public park." "Max, come here," she said, extending her hand toward our son. Max looked back and forth between us, clearly confused by the tension. "Why can't Dad watch my game?" "Because your father is having some problems right now," Danielle said carefully. "What kind of problems?" I met Danielle's eyes through the fence. "Good question, Max. What kind of problems am I having?" "Nick, don't do this here." "Do what? Answer my son's question?" A small crowd was starting to gather. Other parents, curious about the drama unfolding near the soccer field. I recognized several of them, neighbors, people from Max's school, parents I'd known for years. "Max," I said, "do you remember the envelope I gave to Mr. Peterson?" "Nick," Danielle's voice carried a warning. "What envelope?" Max asked. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a manila folder. "I had some tests done, buddy, medical tests, about our family." "What kind of tests?" Troy stepped forward. "This isn't appropriate." "You're right," I said, looking directly at him. "None of this is appropriate." I opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. DNA test results, printed on official letterhead with clinical language that reduced 17 years of lies to simple percentages and probability ratios. "Max," I said gently, "did you know that Emma isn't my daughter?" The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Max stared at me with wide eyes, not understanding what I'd just said. Danielle went completely still. "What do you mean?" Max asked. "I mean your sister has a different father." "That's impossible." I held up the test results. "DNA doesn't lie, buddy." The crowd around us had grown larger. I could hear whispers, see people pulling out phones to record the drama. Danielle's carefully constructed reputation was crumbling in real time, in front of the entire middle school soccer community. "Nick, stop," she said quietly. "Stop what? Telling the truth?" Troy tried to intervene. "This is a private family matter." "Is it?" I looked around at the growing crowd. "Because it seems pretty public to me." I turned back to Max. "Your mom and Troy have been together for a long time, buddy. A lot longer than they want people to know." "How long?" Max's voice was small, barely a whisper as the weight of the truth settled in. "About 17 years." The math was simple enough for a 12-year-old to understand. Emma was 16. If Troy and Danielle had been together for 17 years, then... "Troy is Emma's dad?" Max asked, his voice faltering, as if even hearing the words aloud made them more real. "Biologically speaking, yes." The tension in the air grew thick, and Danielle finally found her voice. "Max, we need to go home and discuss this privately." Max's eyes filled with confusion, hurt, and a bit of anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it's complicated," Danielle said, but even she knew the excuse rang hollow. "It's not complicated," I said, my voice steady but cold. "It's simple. Your mom was having an affair, got pregnant, and decided to let me raise another man's child without telling me the truth." Danielle flinched, her face going pale, but Troy stepped forward, his expression flushed with anger. "That's enough," he snapped. "You're right, it is enough," I shot back. I folded the DNA results and slipped them back into my pocket. The crowd around us was growing, some curious, some eager to record the unfolding drama on their phones. By tomorrow, the entire town would know the truth about Danielle and Troy's relationship. It was a small town, after all. Nothing stays hidden for long. I turned back to Max, my son, standing there caught in the middle of it all. "Max," I said softly, my voice breaking through the tension. "I love you. You're my son, and that will never change. But I wanted you to know the truth about your family. The words hung in the air, heavier than I expected, but they needed to be said. I didn't expect any immediate resolution, and I didn't want it. This wasn't about fixing things. It was about tearing down the walls of lies they had been hiding behind for far too long. Without another word, I turned and walked away, my feet carrying me off the soccer field and away from the chaos I had just unleashed. Behind me, I could hear Max asking questions, his voice trembling with the weight of the truth. Danielle was trying, desperately, to explain 17 years of secrets in a way a 12-year-old could understand, but I knew it was pointless. The damage was done. It wasn't revenge, exactly. It was just the truth, delivered at the worst possible moment in the most public possible way. Sometimes that's enough. The truth doesn't need revenge to be powerful. It just needs to be heard. And today, it had been.